Have you ever wanted to be a part of a community with like-minded people that care about Black women's health the way you do? Well, My Sister's Keeper is for you. It's a movement for us, by us. MSK is all about informing young Black women about their health, engaging them in conversations and programming that reflects their lived experience. Are you looking for a community, a program that pours into you, and an opportunity to be a part of a Black women-centered legacy? No matter where you are in the country, you can join the program through the BWHI app. Go to bwhi.org today and sign up for the MSK program.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bria Johnson, and I'm the Reproductive Justice Coordinator here at the Black Women's Health Imperative, and I am on the MSK team. I'm really, really happy to be here tonight to talk to you all about reproductive justice. Some of you may know BWHI is building out our reproductive justice work, and this event is just one of the many programmings that we have towards that. So we're going to go ahead and get right started. And we have a video from one of the mothers of the reproductive justice movement, Loretta Ross, and we're going to play that video for you now.
Well, the beauty of the reproductive justice framework is that it ends the isolation of abortion from other social justice issues. And so it allows us to have the conversation about abortion at the same time we're talking about white supremacy or economic injustice or welfare rights or HIV/AIDS or housing or police brutality, all the other things that go on in our communities that are also human rights violations, because it is a human rights-based framework. And so I think that is our best ally right now, that we have an intersectional, inclusive framework that allows us to have conversations with people who are uncomfortable maybe only focusing on abortion. Because, reproductive justice is the right to have a child and not have a child, and to parent our kids as we talk about it. And so these are things every community cares about. These are things that environmental injustices and all those kind of things that you could wrap into the reproductive justice framework.
Okay, so that was Loretta Ross explaining reproductive justice just a little bit. One thing I hope you got from that video is the fact that reproductive justice goes far beyond just the right to have an abortion. It goes far beyond abortion rights. And I would even argue that it goes far beyond even human rights, which is the framework that reproductive justice uses. When I think about reproductive justice, I think about the totality of Black women and gender oppressed people's lives. I think about full bodily autonomy. I think about Black liberation. I think about what it means to have choice, but like radical choice, right? Because right now I don't actually think that choice exists. So I think reproductive justice has a lot to do with this thing called agency that we want over our lives and what we want our communities to have, that I think is really important. But in its literal definition, reproductive justice does take on a human rights framework, both that we can't ignore as well. And hopefully some of our panelists will talk about that a little bit. And yeah, so I think we can go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to start introducing you to the wonderful people who will be speaking tonight. The first person is Jelani Owens. Jelani is a reproductive justice organizer, and Jelani uses they, them pronouns. Next up, we're going to have Nina. Nina is a reproductive justice lawyer and organizer. Nina also uses they, them pronouns. And lastly, we have Oni Crawford. Oni is a mutual aid organizer and exotic dancer. Oni uses she, her pronouns. And again, my name is Bria Johnson, and I use she, they pronouns. And yeah, so we can jump right into it. First, I'm very happy to have all of you, two of you I call comrade and friend. And Jelani is a mutual on Twitter whose work I absolutely love. And I was so happy when they agreed to be on this panel. I think all of you offer a very unique perspective to reproductive justice, either in how you think about the world or in the work that you do. And so I would love for you all to just first start off by introducing yourselves and tell us what your work is, and we can go from there.
I can go first. I'm Jelani. I am one of the people managing Fill the Gap, which started as a mutual aid project, but we're kind of just doing a resource distribution model. And we're pretty active in New York City, primarily distributing menstrual products, emergency contraception, condoms, pregnancy tests. And so we started in the context of obviously the COVID-19 pandemic, but we've kind of transitioned to make ourselves more sustainable going forward, especially as we're all kind of seeing how like COVID-related joblessness and like housing insecurity, food insecurity has kind of contributed to what reproductive autonomy looks like. So that's kind of the work that I've been up to.
Thank you. Okay, Oni, can you go up next?
Hi, I'm Oni. I guess in organizing, I don't use my last name as much as I used to when I was teaching. I'm an exotic dancer, and I am also a mutual aid organizer, the project manager for All Mothers Mutual Aid. We're a mutual aid. I've got to get used to it. We are a direct and mutual aid network /org. And what we do is we service mothers ages from 14 to about 25, 30 is like the cutoff. And we try to do like bi-weekly grocery distribution. We're starting to do like some IG Live online poly ed. We do like retreats for sex workers and for moms and some advocacy work. Y'all like doing a lot. And then my like more formal work as far as like academically in my writing and stuff like that is around Black motherhood, and particularly thinking about the welfare policy, the ways that Black moms mother, and then Black feminist lit. I do like everything.
You do everything. Okay. Oh, just in time. It's you, Nana. If you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work you do.
Cool. I don't know. I'm identified as an organizer. I do a lot of different things, but I guess in the realm of like reproductive justice, quote unquote, I have worked in federal and state policy around issues of abortion, birth control, like anti-trans and gay legislation, sexual and reproductive education, maternal mortality, and more. And I actually did wrote up things for this conversation because I was really excited to be in conversation with folks because I've been very interested and invested for several years of like how to get Black, trans, and queer folks who've kind of come through this RJ movement in the space. But outside of that, my organizing focuses on policing and prison abolition, political education, relationship building, mutual aid and fundraising, capacity building, conflict mediation. I said I identify as non-binary queer radical who pulls from Black feminism, Black international feminism, Pan-Africanism, anti-imperialism, communism, socialisms, anarchisms, and really just like whatever's going to get Black people free and give us the space and capacity to exercise autonomy. And I think that includes autonomy over our like reproductive health and reproductive outcomes.
Okay. I think I want to go forward with your last sentence. What does autonomy mean for us who do this work?
Sorry, you just went out.
Oh, I said I wanted to go off your last sentence. What does autonomy mean?
I think I remember, so you asking that question like in that way makes me think of one of my professors from college, and Dr. Randolph, shout out to him, he's amazing. He like we were in a class, it was like senior year. I had taken him multiple times, and plus he was an English professor and I was an English major. So I was like one of the like older ones who like sat in his classes, and to be honest, just kind of like snarked at all the people who were just taking the hip hop class because they needed to fill an elective, but like really didn't understand what we're talking about. This being in college. And so I remember just being annoyingly like perturbed at the idea that the people around me, like my colleagues, like the other students, like just didn't have like autonomy. And so like the way that they were answering questions was just like based on this idea that they had to take like one route of like living, or they had to interpret probably whatever we were reading in like one really rigid way that didn't seem to make too much sense. And so I was just like, to my professor, often English students like have to have these type of moments, because so many people just take English classes as a general, and there's a difference between like English as a discourse and then like English as like a subject you take to pass or whatever. And so like there's moments where like it's between you and the teacher, because like nothing else is happening here. These people don't care for it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember just being like, bruh, the obvious answer is whatever I was so pressed about. And he was just like, and I was like, oh, we're autonomous. We're autonomous. Like, why are they saying these things? We are free. We are free. Whatever. And he was like, no, you are autonomous, and you have a certain understanding or whatever of like who you are. And you're making an assumption right now that everybody else around us is living in the same, you know what I'm saying, like reality as we are. And that's just simply not the case. And when he said that to me, he was that professor for me. They were just like, okay, girl, well, I'll go back to my seat. But
okay. So what I'm hearing in your story is there's a level of like freedom to make your own choices, is how you're saying autonomy is.
Yes, and then also like I think that for what it's worth, because I'm discussing it in a context of like I learned this in academia, like I learned this in college, there's like a level of privilege that I think you become like responsible for, and we should try to. I don't know that necessarily privilege is the right word, but maybe access is a word that we have like as leadership to understand that like we are operating under a certain level of autonomy, right? Like I'm a dancer, and so like I was like complaining the other day about like some dynamics in the club, and my homegirl was like, I was like, yeah, bitches keep walking up and walking up to next to the nigga. I'm trying to dance. These bitches hating. And so my homegirl is, and I'm like, but at the end of the day, like people, you know what I'm saying, people need that. This girl need that money as much as better, more than I do, is what I said. And so my homegirl was like, no, they do not need that money more than you. You got bills. You got a kid. And I'm like, sis, you're right. I was like, but didn't you also hear me say that I had the panel this week? Like, didn't you also just hear me tell you that I just got off another advocacy like conversation? Then you just hear me say that I got this in the fire, this iron in the fire, this iron in the fire, this iron in the fire. And so like it was kind of the reverse with my homegirl. My homegirl was trying to tell me the same thing that I was trying to tell my professor. You got your rights. You got your rights. You got your rights. And me like trying to understand who I am in a dance space. You know what I'm saying? I have this fancy language for sex work and and I can come up against institutions in ways that the girls around me can't come up against. That's very uncomfortable. It's extremely uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But the reality of the situation is that like I have a level of access, and so that's what if my level of access is what's going to be what qualifies me for leadership, then also it needs to be what tethers me to knowing that like if I don't want to, like I had a panel today, so like if I don't want to go to work, I don't have to.
And what I'm hearing from that is that a part of agency and autonomy comes with resources and access. Right. I would love Jelani, if you would like to chime in about what you think autonomy is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I definitely agree. I think access is so much about what autonomy is. I think like in the work that I do, a lot of what we're trying to do now is fill in like gaps of knowledge or just understanding of like what it means to like have reproductive autonomy. Like a lot of people are like, I don't want to have a kid, so like why does reproductive justice matter to me? Like I'm like if I don't need an abortion and I don't have children, like what is the buy-in for me? Mm-hmm. And so like we give out like Plan B, which is something that I don't like know a lot of other organizations that are able to do. Like part of the fact that just Plan B is ridiculously expensive and to get it is just a whole journey. And so I think trying to give people those resources, like whether it be like actually Plan B or just this is what Plan B is, this is what like this means for you, this is what options you have as far as contraception goes. Like I think it's so much about literally just knowing what you can and can't do. And then also just knowing that like if I don't have autonomy, like why is that? Is it because, for example, thinking about a lot of caretakers during the pandemic, is it because I've experienced job loss, which leads to me now, you know, having housing insecurity or food insecurity? Like, what are the limits to my autonomy and why do they exist? And like, how can I either remove those obstacles or like build power within my community to like move those obstacles too?
Mm, okay. I'm gonna let Nina answer the question of what is autonomy, and then I want to go back to something you said about how people who have no interest really in the conversation of children are always asking what is their buy-in, and I would love if we could talk about like what does it mean when so many people still think that like having a child or not having a child is the basis for reproductive justice, right? Like, what does it mean that we're still here? I would love to come back to that, but we'll let Nina answer the question.
Can I tie this question into the question you had posed to us is like, what is RJ in your own words? Because I have this long write up, and I think that kind of gets to some of the autonomy, which really is, as folks said, like the ability to have control over your lives, over your body, over your destinies without, force, without coercion, particularly for Black people's ability to self-determine. So I had said reproductive justice is a history of Black women, Black trans and queer people's resistance against domestic and global imperialism, from slavery to colonialism to Jim Crow to now. It is Black people exercising their right over their bodies and their destinies during an ongoing war against their families and communities. It is the Black mother who threw her child over the slave ship to the Black slave who went deep into the bush with the village midwife to get herbs to force an abortion so that she would not bring a Black baby into this violent system. To the Black grandmothers who have adopted countless children and have taken time to pass on stories, feed and bathe, and defend them against this U.S. empire. The Black children who ran away from slavery and also still run away from their current homes. The Black trans people who created underground exchange and harm reductionist practices and herbs and medicines for hormones and gender affirming care. To the drug addicted Black pregnant person who used marijuana to self-medicate. To Black prisoners who fight against sexual violence at the hands of prison guards and the state. To the Black auntie who passes on sex education to little ones. This is long, shows them how to use condoms, tells them about Black pride and healthy relationships and the expansiveness of gender and how there can be many worlds. To the Black revolutionaries who fight in the front lines against the state, who resist war while taking care of their...
You're muted, Nina. There you go.
Wanted to particularly uplift the Move family, who right now is fighting against UPenn and the government of Philadelphia in order to release Mumia Abu-Jamal, and also because UPenn stole the remains of their children when the government bombed them. And so like all these are like reproductive justice issues, and also thinking about there's a lot of indigenous, autonomous Garifuna and Creole and Maroon communities, throughout Latin America, in like Nicaragua, like the Monkey Point folks who are fighting against like U.S. corporations and who are poisoning their environment. And just wanted to just came across an article yesterday or today, I think, where it was like over 20 Congolese women who were naming that people who worked for WHO, the World Health Organization, had a history and practice of sexual exploitation and sexual abuse of the women who were working there, who were forced to work in these people's homes because of Ebola. So there's all these things that are happening that make determinations around who can and cannot parent. And I think even I also want to push a non-bioessentialist way, right? It's like we're also still thinking about the future of our children, whether that's biological or not, and that impacts how we make decisions, right? Because we were also thought of in the future. And so whether that's biologically or like as a world, we're contributing to Black children and the future of Black children, all these things impact how people decide to form their families, how people exercise autonomy over their sexualities and their genders. But none of that can happen when we're like up against this really violent system.
Thank you. Whew, that was great. Thank you so much. I like what you said about determinisms and thinking about moving beyond biology. I know Black feminism has given us the language of other mothering. And I think some of the ways in which we other mother has a lot to do with this issue of reproductive justice. I think, Jelani, were you going to say something earlier? about when I asked the question about your buy-in, the comment you said about the buy-in. I would love your response to that, and then we can go to Oni because I can see what you're thinking.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think that people, even like as much, like literature and just like community conversations there are about reproductive justice still, based on just like the popularity of like the pro-choice framework are like, this is just like abortion, but like Black people talking about abortion, which like, of course, like I care about abortion, but like the reproductive justice framework, like as a whole, like what really attracted me to it initially when I was like much younger and trying to figure out like what I was going to do, because like pro-choice feminism wasn't really doing it for me, was the way that like just this concept of other mothering and thinking about like family units, whether they be chosen family or like biological family, and just the idea of like safety, like thinking about the idea that it's about obviously whether or not you want to be a biological parent, but it's also about having the autonomy to raise your family and to participate in family like safely and free from state violence or lateral violence or whatever it is. And so like particularly thinking about like for me, like I was in journey with Planned Parenthood when like around the time that they were responding to a lot of like the call outs around the fact that they were pretty silent when Black Lives Matter was first like kind of coming forward, and about this just idea of how can you be like a reproductive justice organization and you're not talking about the fact that Black mothers in particular are like in this moment don't have the right to raise children that come of age, like in a country where we're dealing with state violence. So I think kind of observing those tensions about like what is the buy-in, if we really had like an understanding of reproductive justice as being about all of us and not just I have this set of organs and therefore I can have children this way, and kind of thinking about it as like our communities and from this like community power perspective, I think a lot more people would be like, this is automatic. This is what I'm doing already. This is what I believe already.
I love that. Oni, I'm going to let you chime in before I respond.
I think that people have buy-in but don't want to admit that that's what it is. My timeline is in flames. My mentions are going off right now because I'm tired of F them kids. I cannot read that anymore. I'm actually so tired of it. I am an educator still, even though I'm not in a classroom, and I am a mother. That is literally why I have on the Read t-shirt. I'm fresh off the playground. Okay, so like. What I was like trying to explain, which is what my hope is that conversations like this and then conversations that On Mothers is able to like further or whatever, is that like when you grow up in a world where everybody is agonizing about taking care of you, you don't feel cared about. Like this is the same timeline that like is screaming, go to therapy, go to therapy, go to therapy. Did something happen to you when you were a kid? Yes. Yes, it did. Adulthood isn't out. And it's not even an out that everybody gets because like Jelani just said, like you're not able to really come of age, like, you know what I'm saying, the way that you're supposed to because you're experiencing state violence. And something that my mentor teacher said to me about the reason why she decided to teach us in 6th grade was she was like, people act like they forget what it was like to be 12 years old. And I really feel that. Like you act like you don't. I say this like literally. I mean, Bria knows. I'm literally like every other day mad at someone. Like it's like, don't you understand that like children grow up to be people, and like one day we are gonna get old. If my grandmother's like recent death just taught me anything, it's that you do get old and die. If you get old, you do. It's gonna happen, and there's gonna be people that have to take care of you. And like you and like I don't think and elder care and that for me elder care is definitely a reproductive justice issue. Like for me, and yes, for every like yes, period. Because like somebody is gonna have to take care of elders, and like I was caring for a boomer who had something to give me. We ain't boomers, y'all. And we just out here like we can't continue to repeat like the same like negative perceptions like towards children and then think that we're gonna have something if we haven't. It's like the same thing as like how we trying to be on our 401k whatever like the same kind of investment that we are expecting back we really need to put in. And the harmful discourse and like just how flippant and easy it is for us to discuss children like in such a negative manner is like children can see and they can hear. They know when they are not wanted around. And it's very clear that like generations below us are not having that. Generation Z is dragging us like every week. Because the kids not with that no more. So we can't be on the same thing. That's the buy-in. Everyone was once a child. Everyone will hopefully be old.
So do you think that some of that rhetoric comes from people who are in the realm of the right to not have a child and are feeling or responding to social pressures that they believe exist to have a child? Do you think that's some of it? Do you think people are responding to like their resentment that should actually be going towards capitalism? Is this punching down? Like, what do we think is happening with that type of rhetoric?
So I definitely think that there is some punching down happening. And thinking about what On Mothers does specifically, I'm thinking about like the way people discuss single moms that always like itches my skin. The reality of the situation is that like we were told, right? Because like I would imagine that people that like young millennials probably are some of the last people. Somebody tweeted the other day that like had TV on that you just had to watch because it was on. Like there wasn't this like high level of choice for representation. If the Brady Bunch came on Nick at Night, we was just watching it. Like that's just kind of what it was. And so like that representation was very different for us in that way. So I'm saying that to say that like we were told that like especially like a certain Black middle class people, we were told like husband, dog, college, kid, that's what's going to save the Negro race. That's what everyone's going to save the Negro race. Single moms getting to like date openly and like get married and like how dare she enjoy her life and still be cared for.
Right.
Like, you know what I'm saying? I feel like it's this like frustration that I was told, or we all were told as a group to live a certain way. And because single motherhood pushes you so far outside of that range of like, because I'm undesirable, I'm a throwaway at this point. That's what it's given. That's how it's discussed. That's how I'm treated. And so it's like, if I decide to just like, you know, paint on the margins, right? Like in order to like make the metaphor, if I decide to like paint on the margins and like make the fact that I am a single mom like my thing, or like or be excited about it. I always think about if Fantasia's song Baby Mama, which is like in my top 10 songs of all time, if that song ever came out when Twitter was out, every time I listen to that song, I'm like, my phone would blow up. It would. Because the whole time how y'all making songs about being BMs and da 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 da. And the other day for Mother's Day, it was like on the radio, it was like what was the question? Oh, should somebody get their baby mother? I hate the radio. That's why I listen to my phone. Should somebody get their baby mother present for Mother's Day? No, they just need to be married. I gotta be married for a card.
I think what you're alluding to is this idea that care is only supposed to be given to respectable mothers, right? And like anybody that falls outside of that, then ultimately your reproductive choices, decisions, whether they actually were or were not, are automatically your fault. And whatever your circumstances are your fault, is a lot of what we see. And I think if we understand the history of reproductive discourse, I would say, not justice, but discourse, what we know in the United States context is the only mothers that America has ever had any real sympathy for is white widowed women. That's the only people who we think are worthy of support and care, because they did not become single moms at their own quote unquote volition. So they should get a little bit of support, but everybody else, you're all on your own. You don't deserve anything, any care, any support. And I also think that, like, what does it mean to say we have the right to parent and we have rights over our lives, but you have so many people who may actually want to parent solo? What does that look like, right? Like, if we keep on pushing this thing called the nuclear family and respectability, how does that take away from our reproductive autonomy if this is the way that it's actually supposed to look? And I think that you and Jelani have really spoke to that a little bit. there was something that Nana said earlier that I can't remember, but I'm trying to get back to. But I'm thinking about, oh my gosh, you said so much. First, I'm just gonna let you. Do you have any response to what we've been talking about, Nana?
Well, you were talking about the buy-in, and I was thinking about this organization in Austin, Texas called 401, and there was a Black boy whose name was Jordan, who was having a mental health crisis and was murdered by the Austin Police Department. And so they basically organized a caravan and decided to occupy the park in the neighborhood where he was murdered, and create an autonomous space, and invite, the neighbors and other folks into their organizing work, to be able to get, different resources like food and water. And one of the things that they were doing also door to door is giving out like baskets of herbal medicines and an education around self-managed abortions, and talking to folks about why reproductive autonomy is directly connected to their campaign, which is called March of the Block, which is essentially that Black people in this neighborhood can control their own safety and should have autonomy over their own safety. And that safety is not just security and armed defense, which is what they're willing to do in order to protect Black people, but it's also the ability to have also reproductive autonomy over your body, especially, and this is in Texas, right? So this is a particular state that has experienced an onslaught of anti-abortion laws for decades. And so I think that was a really important action, and also a way to invite folks into ancestral knowledge, right? It's like, because of the right wing government, bipartisan Democratic and Republican party backed right wing rhetoric around abortion and birth control, and, kind of co-opting this language around, the most dangerous place for African or Black child is in the womb, and really, have pathologizing Black parenthood, and out of this legacy of like slavery, right?
You're muted again, Nana.
Why people have such repulsion towards Black children is, a lot of the slaves that were even brought to this country and around the world were children, right? And so it's been acceptable in the society that Black children are at the bottom of society and are the most vulnerable and the most exploited population. And I was actually listening to Joy James earlier today, who was talking about reproductive autonomy somewhat, and just lost my train of thought. What was I just saying?
You were talking about Joy Jane?
Yes, right. What was I saying right before that?
People hate Black kids.
Yeah, Black
kids. Yes. So she was just saying about how, she talks about how, in her early activism organizing years, how she had gone to this international conference, and she was in the room with, Frelimo, Mozambique, freedom fighters, folks from Iran, folks from all over, like women, socialists and communists who were fighting in their national liberation struggles. And that was like kind of the most solidarity around feminism on an international level that she saw. And they had like a children bill of rights that they were like lobbying Reagan administration. But she was just like, what if the Black feminist, movement right now was able to revive this children's movement that says that if anything, that our Black children will have all the things that they need in order to survive and thrive, and to actually look at children as that site of all these different societal ills that we punish and project onto children. And so I think, I definitely came up in the, I don't want to have children type thing in a very like reactive way, but also there is also I believe in Black people's self-determination to have children, not have children. And I think it's always been a thing, throughout history, right? And we also, like you said, parent in many different ways that are not always biological. And so, yeah.
I love what you just said. It's making me think about how much of my decision earlier in life to not have children I thought was my decision, and when I unpacked it, it was like, actually, I don't think I can afford it. Actually, I have a lot of student loans and I'm not trying to add a daycare bill. Actually, a 2-bedroom apartment in DC is a lot different than a studio apartment in price. And I realized so much of my reproductive choices were around money. And so, like, how could I call them a choice, really? Because it really isn't a choice. I'm saying the difference between taking on this much money versus being like, okay, never mind. And so, my question is, what really does anti-capitalism and reproductive justice and like our movement towards an anti-capitalist world have to do with a reproductive justice framework? What are those lines? How much are they connected? And where do you all see in your line of work where this comes up?
It just makes me think about like my own choice to have a child.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the space I was in when I did I did that. Like and the only reason why I'm laughing is just because like it's interesting now, especially like today, you know, but like what really like what I remember was that like I had a depressive year. Like the summer of 2015 to the 2016 was like the worst time of life ever. I was supposed to graduate. Life was just like pew 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 pew. Everything sucked. And so like I then found out I was pregnant, and it was just like just because, you know, just why not? Like come on. Let's okay. And so like I remember like trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and I remember being like really adamant about the fact that the only person who could like really make that choice for me was me. And so like so many different things happened in that moment because I heard from so many different people about what I should do. Like there were like some people who were like, if I know anyone who's capable of being an excellent mother, it's you. But that's because I've been mothering since I was like 10. I'm one of 7, like the oldest of 5. Like that's a lot. And so I'm like, okay, people are saying you're capable, but they're really telling me that I'm capable on the basis that I've been given labor that like wasn't mine or whatever for real. So then there's the group of people who was like, this is insanity, right? Then there's like a group of people who was like kind of neutral. And like for me, it was just like, this feels corny, but it was like, I remember that like I have read Beloved. And one thing that I didn't want to live with was regret. Because one thing that I really like, what really pierced me about that book was that like Setha like very clearly like was living in a space of regret because she had been losing her choices to mother for like a really long time. Like we have the beginning of the text where like they're taking her milk from her, and it's like really, really you know, torturous, vulgar way. And then you have like, you know, her oldest daughter being like, how dare you get some companionship outside of this space? And that was tough for her. And then you have like Paul D coming back with like all his chain gang woes and woe is me and black man wandering, babies, people are dying. It's a whole bunch going on inside this world. But like she's fixated on the fact that like in that moment, she had to make a choice to kill her child. And that seemed like that branded her or whatever, like that branded her the feeling like, oh gosh, I can't allow this baby to like live in this space, especially because she had another baby after that. And so I was just like, I don't want to live in regret. Like I don't want to feel this way. But the kill and the reason why reproductive justice work makes so much sense for me, and just like for my life's work, but then also for like what I want to be able to express to people as I go on, is that like even though I made my own choice, I still had like that autonomy piece that we talked about earlier. Even though I made my own choice, the same things that other single moms go through, I still go through those things too. My choice didn't absolve me of the consequences of existing outside of that.
But I think what you're saying really hits at the fact that like reproductive justice has to go beyond choice, right? Because you make a choice, and
Yeah.
it was your choice to become a mother, and still there was still either a type of violence or a type of consequence, and we should be free of that, which is justice, right?
Yes.
We should be free.
Yes. Yes, because it happens and I hate it. I hate when I ask for support from anywhere, from any person who exists in a different positionality that has more privilege than me, or from any institution. I get met with, you chose to be a mom, that's on you. You chose to be a mom, that's on you. Every time it's on me. Every time.
On you every time. Right. Yeah, that's real. I'm gonna let Jelani go, and then I have another question specifically for you, Oni.
Yeah, I mean, I love talking about anti-capitalism and reproductive justice. In addition to like the organizing stuff I'm doing, I'm also a law student by a series of unfortunate events. And like the work that I care about, like in the legal context, is like family defense work. So like essentially telling child welfare, whatever they call themselves, like on any given day, like to leave families alone. And like from doing that work over the last few months, like so much of that part of the law is just deciding that poverty is something that disqualifies somebody from being a parent, and saying like, because you're poor, I'm just going to take your kid and give it to somebody else. And so
wait, but like not just give them money to take care of your kid. Money I won't give you. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And like I think about that all the time, because like where I tend to clash with like a lot of reformists, like thinking about somebody who I think that family regulation system needs to just be gone, abolished, is like, if this was about child welfare, logically the state would say, oh, you are poor and so that's why you're experiencing housing insecurity, whatever it is. Let me give you the money to supplement whatever you don't have, and then you can keep your kid with you. If I'm an agency that favors reunification, keeping families together, whatever it is, they don't do that, which tells you that's not the priority. So like on this one hand, we punish poor people for having children, but then on the other, like I don't know anybody like in my circle who's able to afford birth control like out of their own pocket without insurance, without some type of reduction, going to Planned Parenthood, whatever it is. Same thing with emergency contraception. Same thing with IUDs. Like so much of my work is trying to do Plan B and trying to do contraception, because a lot of people are like, well, I can't afford the Plan B. If I can't afford the Plan B, I cannot afford the abortion. If I can't afford the abortion or the Plan B, I cannot afford the child. And like, even though that's the logical conclusion, like the state also is like, well, you're on your own. You should just not have sex. Like poor people just shouldn't have sex. You should be working. Like that's capitalism. Like you shouldn't have time for pleasure in any way, shape, or form because you're poor. What are you doing? And so I think that like looking at the fact that capitalism is going to punish you if you have children, and you know, even if you're somebody who's like quote unquote pro-life and somebody who's like, I don't support abortion, whatever it is, you're going to be punished for having the kid anyway, but you're also going to be punished for not having the kid because they're not going to give you any resources to practice like quote unquote safe sex, or to use contraception, whatever it is. So you're stuck no matter what. So there's no way to actually exercise choice as long as capitalism exists. Like you can't say that you're exercising autonomy or choice if you're like, well, the alternative to this is to be houseless permanently, or to not have food, or like I'm going without something to make this other choice. That's not autonomy at all. Like you can make the choice that's best for you. You can look at your circumstances and say this is the healthiest choice for me right now, but there's still always that like capitalism kind of just looming over and saying, well, here's the choices that you can make. And from those, use your willpower accordingly.
Yes, y'all really just said everything. And I will also add, I think like the punishment of not having children is the fact that there's no universal elderly care either, you know? So it's like, oh, you didn't have kids? I don't know who's going to take care of you. I hope you have extended family, right? Like these consequences that kind of linger for our reproductive choices are so connected to capitalism. My question specifically for you, Oni, is in what ways do you see sex work as a reproductive justice issue? Or not?
Well, no, it's cool. It's very simple. Most of us are moms. Mostly everybody is a mom, period. Like, I was recalling a locker room conversation where like everybody was showing their C-section scars. Like, it's just, you know, oh, you got kids. Oh, how old is yours? Oh, let me see. Oh, like passing the phone. Like, oh, okay. Oh, okay. I'm gonna keep it chill because I heard to relax today. But the other day in the locker room, it was definitely how do I say, like we were laughing because somebody can squirt breast milk. So like it was like, so yeah. And I was like thinking, and I was thinking to myself, oh wow, she's nursing. Like, and I was wondering also how old her kid was for her to be like nursing still. But yes, that was just like a thought I was having. But it's we moms. And
Mhm.
so, and like my favorite part of dancing is like counting up all my ones at the end of the night, and I take my odd ones and I put them on the baby's dresser, and then like she has a drawer full of ones, and then we just like count them together because it's very But and then like 2 Chainz said, they asked me what I do and who I do it for, like like for sis,
I
like.
thank you.
Ew. One of my favorite stories is like one time I was dancing in a spot or whatever, and I was talking to this guy, and he was telling me where he was from, and I was like, oh, okay, like you probably know my cousins because my people's from around there, and he was like, yeah, and so he was like, oh, okay, know the same people, oh, so crazy, and so then he was like telling me who his man was, and I was like, oh, what's up, and he was like, and the dude, look though, the dude was like, I know exactly who you is, you Ophir mother. And I was like, what? And they was like, we always give her dollars. And I was like, oh, well, then give me some too. Y'all know what time it is.
Oh, yeah.
But like in real life, they like reproductive justice, right? In real life, they recognize me as Ophir's mom because I take her around there for my godmother to watch her while I work. And so, like, in that way, when I think about sex work and I think about, like, I've been thinking a lot about this idea of the cash economy, like, that's real life. That's the cash economy. Like, I pay Yvette to watch them, to watch Fur, and then they're out there doing whatever they got going on. They giving Fur a dollar, Fur come home with the dollar, like, you know what I'm saying? Of course, I'm not taking it from Fur, but I go out and also come home with the same dollar, redistribute the dollar, like, the money is passing in there. Like, there are parents in there. Like,
reminded me of the tweet that was like Black people just giving out the same $20. We just the survival to save 20. My next, I actually want to pose that same question to you, Nana, because I know you've done some work around sex worker advocacy. So I would love you to talk about if you do or don't see sex work or the sexual economy as a reproductive justice issue. Oh, you're muted, boo.
You just hating today. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's again, it's about like self-determination and autonomy, and since the end of slavery, Black women have been overrepresented in the sex trade, and that is because Black women have been, particularly Black trans women, have been excluded from formal forms of the economy, and that has resulted in criminalization. And every time there was some hysteria around sex work, that was also connected to queerness, and homophobia. That was also connected to anti-communist sentiments, and then anti-Black sentiments, and all these kind of work together to uphold this colonial project. And so there is, even on the left, this onslaught of like whorephobia and like anti-sex work rhetoric under the guise of like communism. And it's like, recognizing the super exploitation of Black women within that field means that like Black women within the sex trade also have something to say about the exploitation they're facing by the state. I'm thinking about like what I was talking about around the Congolese woman, and one of the Congolese women was working in like domestic, work, which also still overlaps with like, sexual work and exploitation that dates back to slavery and colonialism on the plantation. And, one of the person who worked for whatever, had given her a job as a cleaner, and she got pregnant, and she had to find $300 to get an abortion on the Black market, and the abortion was botched, and so she died, right? And so direct connections between like U.S. imperialism, right? You know, the U.S. under the Obama administration expanded military bases all throughout Africa, and who's on the other end of that, right? Who's on the other end of our choices, even here, is, you know, Black folks of gender who are gender oppressed on the continent, and there's a lot of money and resources that is going into the continent to push these anti-sex work, gay, anti-trans laws throughout the whole country that is backed by right-wing, you know, Christian fundamentalists in the States. And so without U.S., you know, it's like how much time would be and resources would be freed up if the U.S. military and the U.S. corporations were out of Africa. You know, they're on the other side of that economy. Those economies, those tourist economies in the Caribbean and in Latin America is
You're muted again. There you go.
the sex trade and people's and sexual coercion through these, like, you know, white rich men, and also these U.S. corporations, and also these U.S. aid international NGOs. They're all culpable, you know, in Haiti, all over. They're all culpable for the exploitation and the sexual abuse of people in the sex trade, and also domestic trade. And so this is definitely a reproductive issue, right? If yeah, and then, you know, we're thinking of, it's definitely a reproductive autonomy issue on, you know, sex workers also get abortions, you know, and need access to different things, and already face certain barriers by being in certain, you know, types of prostitution. And so that just adds on to it.
Thank you. I think that leads us right into one of the questions I gave you all about what does a world with reproductive justice look like, and what should our priorities be? And I'll let anybody start with that question.
Oh, okay. No, I'm just thinking about like settler colonialism. Like particularly right now, like obviously thinking about like comrades in Palestine. Like I think a world, like an actual world with reproductive justice, like I think has to, confront the fact that like settler states exist. And often work together to maintain like being like functional settler states. Like I'm thinking about, like for me, like in undergrad, like a big thing was like the global gag rule, and the fact that like Western nations are able to leverage aid to decide whether or not gender oppressed people in the global South like can have abortions at all. Like if you receive funds from the US, you can't use them towards abortion, which just like limits, again, like thinking about like what Nana said about like who's on the other end of those decisions. Like I know that like a lot of pro-choice feminists love to be like Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade, Roe v. Wade, but even here, like Roe v. Wade, like there's limits to like what that does for people. But then even still, like I don't care about Roe v. Wade if like my people, my comrades abroad are having their abortion access or just reproductive autonomy limited by the fact that, you know, like the US exists and intervenes, and like thinking about the way that a lot of like anti-sex work rhetoric is tied to the way that the US like decides, oh, we're not giving funding to this because we don't want to encourage like promiscuity or sex work or like gender oppressed people to like use their bodies in any way that isn't quote unquote respectable and echoing like these like Eurocentric like Christian values. And so I think about that and the fact that if we're going to have like a world where reproductive justice exists, these settler states can't allow us to just kind of hang in the balance and decide whether or not I'm going to be able to have X, Y, and Z right tomorrow. And I think even moving past like rights to just say that like no one can, if I can be granted and have it taken away, like I don't want that to be my relationship to what I can and can't do reproductively.
I really love that. That leads into the question that I had asked about, have we taken the wrong approach? Like, you know, I see a lot of limitations with the human rights framework for lots of reasons that we probably can't really go deeply into today. But I mean, I think human rights is a flawed framework. And so when we base so much of how we think and talk about reproductive justice with the human rights framework, which maybe was very, very helpful when it was first thought of for reproductive justice, I just think we're so far beyond that, right? And so for me, it's like, this has to be more than human rights. I mean, really, and I'm not even gonna ask the question if he was a human because it's not given that tonight. But you know where I'm going with this. But if anybody else wants to answer the question of what does a world with reproductive justice look like and what should our priorities be, now is that time.
I want Nana to go because I want to go last.
Okay.
You said you want to go?
She wants you to go.
Oh, and they said I want to go because I want to go next. I was like, go ahead. Yeah, I wrote some thoughts down. So, what should our priorities be? You know, we're in the midst of COVID-19 and ongoing environmental catastrophe. So I think, you know, really, you know, it's interesting that you say throw the human rights framework in the trash. You know, I do think it comes out of like Africans, you know, Africans utilizing multiple different types of strategies to leverage, and that has been co-opted by, you know, the Western European international community. So I understand those sentiments. But yeah, I said so I was going to say, I think we should go back to like, you know, the 1994 where it was internationalist, but not in a liberal way. And so, you know, environmental would necessarily be internationalist and attacking the world's biggest polluter, which we've kind of discussed as the US military and their European allies, you know, who are currently causing mass destruction and climate catastrophe through the bombing of whole villages, right? Bombing, burning of forests, you know, mining for minerals.
You're muted again.
Pillaging and raping. You know, as I said before, if the U.S. would cease to exist, how much more possible would Black liberation be? How much time and resources will we have to actually build up our communities, our relationship with our land, to our bodies and ourselves and those around us? We would be able to guarantee the future of our children's world. And like I said, I don't mean it in a biological way or bioessentialist way, you know, but we cannot do that. You know, if police violence is rampant, right? And police violence being an extension of the state genocide against Black people, and, you know, the state imposing its will on our destinies. So I think if there was a such thing as a reproductive justice movement, it would go back to its internationalist roots and not in a bit Black liberal feminist way, but a movement that actually connects people's ability to determine their reproductive outcomes to the imperialist war machine and the environment it creates that is causing the high maternal rates, right? Like when I was like a couple weeks ago, like organizing some Haiti solidarity rallies. And so I was just like reading more and learning more about the Haitian Revolution and slavery in Haiti. And there was high maternal mortality rates then, right? You know, there was a lot of Black women and Black people dying in pregnancy, right? There was a lot of children, infants dying. You know, there was plantations, you know, in the Caribbean where people didn't live past 15 years old, and so this is like also like positioning this in the legacy. You know, we talk about it, but do we actually like concretize it and like base it in like the reality of what's still happening today? Where like literally, if you're seeing police violence constantly, we cannot guarantee the safety of our children if police exist. We cannot guarantee the safety of our children if the state, United States exists. And I'm thinking about my friend and comrade Efe, who is, you know, a midwife who, you know, has been really trying to push this idea of the commune, you know, because on one end, you know, she would say, yeah, let's increase midwives. But then it's like a lot of midwives are dying from cancer and, you know, a lot of different things because there's such little infrastructure for that support. And so like reviving the commune, you know, a place where communities can be invested in the health and well-being of children, and trans and queer folks and disabled folks and elderly folks are all cared for, you know, and people who are in those communities know medicine, they're studying medicine, they're learning medicine, and the midwives, you know, are there and abundant, and the food we eat comes from, you know, what we know, you know, because what we eat is directly related to, you know, our health. Yeah, so I think reproductive autonomy really would be, you know, and I'm also thinking about Ash, you know.
You're muted.
Who I think is really important doing really important work in North Carolina and in the South, for trans liberation, and also, fighting for, prison abolition, and fighting for trans and queer folks who are inside to have access to hormones and to have access to, the outside and get out of cages, and that is restricting their autonomy. But something else he's also doing has been doing free doula trainings, for Black people in the South. And so I really think we are, I feel like since I came into this RJ movement, if I'm in it and if it's a movement, I've been talking about like autonomy, like why, I think there's always strategies we can use. But it's just like, why are we petitioning the state to pass policies around abortion when we could just like train people to give abortions and like hold that in a communal, way. We can, all the gender affirming care that people need, like how do we situate that within the community? Because people are already doing it. People just need more support and infrastructure to create these underground and autonomous spaces of care. Like this information should be held within us. And there's just this one quote from this book I'm reading on autonomy in Nicaragua amongst the Creole folks. And it says, Miss Lucille was also on the move, attending births in the small rural settlements that hugged the coastline south of the community. After each birth, she would stay with the new mother for a week or more and then travel back to her family in Monkey Point. She accepted no payment for her services. Midwifery was a skill that she shared with others freely in order to satisfy an essential human need within her community. Right. And so, just also reading about, Black elders who were, who knew medicine and they gave it freely and openly and trained people freely and openly. So if we want to have an anti-capitalist, anti-imperialist movement, we have to get back in a relationship of care and responsibility to each other that has been stripped and continuously individualizes our experiences, right? Like the concept of single motherhood should not be individualized in a way that somebody, such a group of people can be excluded from a community and excluded from resources. And so, yes, I think RJ has been taking the wrong approach because, money coming in, priorities changing, and everything is always focused on policy. But it's like, how is a policy going to translate if people don't know anything about their bodies?
Yeah, I love that you said all that. One of the things I'm working on, I'll give a shameless plug, but one of the things I'm working on is a reproductive justice guide for BWHI, and a lot of it does talk about like one strategy is care work, actually. Like radical care work is a strategy. We do not have to be fully rely on the state. We don't have to. There are alternatives here and other strategies and approaches that are really important. And I'll let Oni answer that question before I go any further.
I think that definitely, this is what I'll say. I'm new to reproductive justice work in this way, with the structure of it. A part of the reason why I approach direct mutual aid the way that I do is because I'm one of those people who believes that like I've been living a Black feminist life for a lot longer than I had the language of naming it as Black feminism. And so like as someone who feels new to this work, even though the nature of my work has been reproductive justice since I started doing it, but like I said, a person who feels new to doing it in this kind of way, think that it hasn't reached enough spaces where that's actually supposed to be the case. And a conversation that I've seen recently about the nuclear family or whatever, I've been seeing like people say stuff like, I saw something really poignant about basically how somebody was like, all y'all keep caping for the, don't do that. All y'all keep caping for the, sorry, that was my dang train of thought. Or I keep caping for this nuclear family model when you need to put some respect on your aunties and your grandmother's names. And it's like, right, because those were single mothers who, in part because of their singleness, let me name, if we're being completely honest, because the ways that marriage and traditional marriage structures often limit women from being able to participate, black women especially. Like this has been true in my life, like the entire time that I've been alive. The Black women, when they are married in a more formal like way and is more respectable, they tend to have a less of a connection with their extended family. And the rest of the community is expected to understand that they are married now. And so their stake that they could have in their extended family's life is lesser, because it is expected now that everyone has to acknowledge as well as oblige this institution. Then that is the institution of marriage. In real life, I don't have no man in my house. So I can pick my goddaughter up and I can take her home. I could let my little brother come over here. And it's not to say that I would, like, you know what I'm saying? And it's interesting when we talk about dating in that way. It's not to say that I would pick someone who would say I can't have my brother over here. Of course, they may say that I can't have my brother over. But if my brother needs to live here right now, he can live here. Period. If my sister need to come here with her son right now, my sister can come here with her son. I don't have to ask not nobody. And the reason why single moms and the reason why we go up like we do for aunties and for grandmas is in part because of their singleness and their disconnection from the institution. There's a level of flexibility in their lives that allows for them to provide care in ways that married women simply can't, because they are tethered and tied to whoever they are married to. And I even think that to a certain extent, socially, this also extends to queer people. The idea that the nuclear family should be a thing, regardless of what genders you plug in there, without the, you know what I'm saying, without the open doors and flexibilities and windows and stuff like that to like other areas, you know, in other areas of need in your community, that is what needs to go. It's where to go. But look, though, if we address that, which is why I'm happy that we talked about like the connection to sex work, if we address that, we're gonna have to talk about desirability. Because who about to get taken out the club? Somebody gonna take me out the club? They didn't let me know.
Oh my God, here we go.
But in real life, it becomes that. It becomes that because my money is connected to my money is connected to my complexion. My money is connected to how well I play up or down being dark skinned. Like my money is connected to I can't have the same aggressive disposition as maybe a light skinned dancer can, because guys think of my aggression differently. That matters. It matters how much in real life. If we're going to say that the nuclear family model should be the thing, that means that we have to uphold marriage in a way that doesn't make sense for us if we want liberation. And so the reality of the situation is that if you want a provider, you got to get a certain kind of provider, and a certain kind of provider likes a certain type of girl. And if you ain't that certain type of girl, then you gonna get that certain type of provider. Then how did you become their baby mother? But they wouldn't wife you. Like, that's real. We have to have a conversation about everybody know the first baby mother ugly. Whoop.
I think what you're hinting at is desirability and its connection to disposability.
Yes,
which is definitely a connection there. Something else that the two of you are making me think about is just how much, like, I like to believe that we are innately collectivists. I like to believe that, like, all those theories about, like, how humans needed to be tamed or humans are innately violent and we needed to go through all of this socialization to civilize us, I don't really align with any of that. I really like to believe that we were and we are innately collectivists. And I think one thing that capitalism has successfully done is, through so many different processes, teach us over and over again to really align with individualism. And we just find new ways to individualize ourselves. And one way we do that is through this unit of the family, where it's like, now everything that happens to you or everything you need to do is between you and your spouse and your kids. That's your unit. That's your responsibility. That's it, right? And like all the processes of individualization happen so much through the constraints they put on our reproductive choices and decisions and autonomy, which is why I see that reproductive justice has to be anti-capitalist. There's really no other way, in my opinion, which I think is the top priority in some cases. You know me, I'm always on the timeline talking about desirability, so I could talk about that all day long and how it affects the way we parent, who we choose to parent with. Like, if we really wanted to be real about our reproductive decisions and our parenting decisions, how many people are deliberately trying to have a cute baby? And what does that say about anti-Blackness, right? Like all of these things, in my opinion, are connected. And so I'm glad that you all brought it up. We're coming to the end of our conversation today. And I'm going to open the space for any last minute thoughts. But I just really wanted to thank all of you all for coming on this panel. You're all three people whose work I love, who I think does incredible things for community. This is my first time getting to see you or actually hear your face, Jelani, but I really, really, really was so happy when you agreed to be here. And I hope to do more RJ work with you in the future. Oni, you know, you are my beloved sister friend, and you're here another time this week. I love you. I love the work that you do, and I love the space you're creating for sex worker moms specifically. You're doing, oh, look at the baby, doing amazing things. Nina, you know I love you. You do incredible organizing work. Whether you identify it as RJ organizing or not, you do some really incredible work. So thank you for joining tonight as well. And so, yeah, I'm going to just open it up if you all have any last minute thoughts or anything.
Yeah, I mean, just encouraging folks to, you know, as Jaylani offered, like, you know, their project on Fill the Gap, like just finding, is that me? Just finding, you know, different ways to actually meet the needs of folks around their reproductive, you know, decisions and autonomy, and connecting it, you know, with some form of like political education and some type of putting the autonomy and decision making back into their hands. You know, I just saw a flyer.
You're out.
Who've been raising funds to send syringes to Cuba to combat and organize against the U.S. Blockade on and economic sanctions on Cuba. And so what would it look like for folks to also be doing that, you know, with gender-affirming care or hormones, you know, exchanging or sending syringes to folks on the, you know, particularly trans people on the continent and throughout the world who are Black, you know, syringes and you know, crowdsourcing hormones and crowdsourcing other forms of medical, you know, life-affirming care that people need to live, right? For some people, this is a life, you know, life or death situation. And so what does it mean to take these issues at hand as really important issues? You know, again, when we're thinking about building for the future generation, it's not just talking about, you know, the biological aspect of like parenting, but like how can we ensure that all the range of Black children are invested in and taken care of and can live a full life, you know, into adulthood, into, you know, old age. You know, that is what we're fighting for. And yeah, I'm just thinking about Maroon communities, and there's this, you know, group of Seminoles in Florida that I learned about sometime at the end of last year, who, you know, were able to fight off colonization from the U.S. For over 100 years, and they had elders in their village who lived to 90, you know, over 90, who had never seen a day of slavery. You know, this is at a high point of slavery, and so what would it take for us to actually create, you know, Maroon space and autonomous communities to ensure that all, you know, Black children, all African children are thought of, and not just the ones in the U.S., but the ones all over the world who oftentimes are experiencing a form of super exploitation and super oppression due to our government.
Whew. Thank you, Nina. Does anybody else have any last minute thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to answer the question. in the chat. What can folks do to see themselves in this work? I just want to touch on it quickly, just crushing on her, but then also like they can do like what you did, you know what I'm saying, and like helping like take care of your brother. Like I just part of like what I really want to do is like present a simplicity of like participation. And so it's like, even if you are not a biological parent, seeing yourself as a stakeholder in the life of a child or in the life of some children or in the lives of some moms is like extremely super duper important. Like I was in a conversation with somebody the other day. I got stories for days. I was in a conversation with somebody the other day, and I was like saying, and I was talking to somebody about how they felt about their role in their family and helping out one of their siblings who was a mother. And so they were like giving me like all these childless woes or whatever, and like da da da, and I feel this way, blah, 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 blah. And I just kept repeating, but you do understand that you're about to go to bed right now by yourself, right? And so like you are complaining and like naming that like this, you're complaining and like naming that this, you know, person or this, you know, moment in your life or whatever is like agonizing, but like, oh yeah, I'm about to go to sleep by myself. I to this day cannot sleep in the bed with someone else. Like I cannot. And part of the reason why is because I've nursed and breastfed, and I did that during my sleep. So my body still has not readjusted to actually completing a full REM cycle if it knows that there's another human in the bed. Like that affects partnerships, y'all. Like I have to have a partner that's cool with not sleeping with me. Like, and I ain't tripping off that. I'm not tripping off that at all. You know me, you know, that's A-okay with your boy. However, I had to put up that boundary in my romantic relationships because motherhood changed my body. Mm-hmm. And it's that simple of like, and that pushed me to like, wow, maybe I need to think more about being queer. Wow, maybe I need to think more about polyamory. Wow, because I need a more flexible relationship style. I am somebody's mother. And so like thinking about the ways that you can just continue to like simplify. It don't have to be that deep. It don't have to be that deep. If you decide like, hey, I want to like do like $20, you know what I'm saying, to a Cash App, whatever the case may be. And that's why I do stuff like the Popeyes or whatever, because people felt like they could contribute to that. And I had money to do that because people was like, oh yeah, totally. I got $10. Yeah. Like I want things to feel actionable because I really hate that what we were talking about earlier. I'm an organizer, so I have the autonomy to act a certain way about the way that I organize. I hit up many of people about wanting to do the fried chicken with me or whatever, and it wasn't given. It simply wasn't. That was my reality because that felt, and I'm sure that felt too simple. It felt too easy. It felt uncomfortable to not be able to ascend via like an academic or like a high order way of thinking, because it makes you ask yourself, why am I participating in this work? Is it so that I can one up other people, or is it so that I can actually do what needs to be done? Because with $10 and a Cash App, I can do what needs to be done. And I don't like that feeling, because then I will actually see that it's possible for me to make this a routine. It's possible for me to enter this in. I was complaining, Shawty was complaining to me. I said, if you're tired of your sister keep asking you for money sporadically, let her know what day of the month she can expect the cash from you. That's how we solve that one. Next. Like, it's real simple. And that's really why I want us to walk with it. It ain't that deep, y'all. It ain't that deep. Can't stop somebody $10.
Okay. Thank you.
It is, but it's not. It's still that deep because we all also up against a lot that is actually limiting our ability to do a lot of the things that we need to do. But absolutely, if more people actually took collective responsibility for children, what type of world would we live in? Yeah.
Good question. Jelani, did you have any last minute thoughts, or would you like to tackle that question even more?
I mean, like going off of that, I'll get like similar questions like, how do you like do the stuff that you do? Like what did you do to do it? And I was a lot of like the organizing that I do, like organize, like even that feels like weird, is me like sending like, are you like you up? Like, did you see this like happen on Twitter? Like, I don't like that. Like, what are we gonna do? Like, what are we gonna do? What's the move? Mm-hmm. And so it's not like this secret club of like somebody like jostled me out of bed like at like 1 a.m. and was like, you're an organizer now. Like, here's like your little toolkit, here's your orientation packet. Like, go ahead. Like so much of it is like, I think part of it comes like with like academics as far as like time, resources, stuff like that too. But like so much of it is being like, oh, well, this impacts me and this hurts me. Here's like the people that are in my network. Like, I know that this is definitely impacting them if it's impacting me, or it's something that's impacting them and I have extra whatever it is, and here's how I can alleviate that problem. Like, I think seeing yourself in the work kind of comes from, I think, maybe not looking at a lot of organizers right now who are, I think, more invested in like careerism and like ascension, like Oni mentioned, and just being like, this is something that my community experiences, like how can I alleviate it, or like who should I talk to, like so I can figure out like what to do, where can I plug in and things like that. Mm-hmm. There isn't like a secret society, like you can do the work because you woke up one day and said I want to do it. Yeah. And like, and using like political education maybe to kind of ground that and see that like a lot of what you're experiencing, like other people have named in ways that might be affirming for you, but you also don't need to like do that study in a formal academic setting. It can be like you and your friends like reading something or like making a zine or whatever it is too.
I love that you say that, because I get this question a lot of like, how do I do this work? How do I do this work? And I always try to flip it to people and I say, what do you want your work to be? What is your work, right? And you can, in order to answer that question, you have to ask yourself, okay, what are my values? What is, and like, what are the stakes here? Are better questions, I think, to ask. And once you kind of figure out what you want your work to be and why you want this to be your work, you can really start anywhere. Truly. I had a stake in incarcerated people because I had an incarcerated parent, right? And so that has always lingered over me. So it makes sense that I send my money to things like Black Mama's Bailout. That just made sense to me. And from there, things grew, and like I grew from there. So I think really just asking the question of like, what do we want our work to be? And I don't mean like individualizing it and like this is just all me, this and that, but really like, where in this do you want to be is a really good question, because you know everybody can't do everything, but what you want your work to be really matters, and it is valuable, right? And we need it in some way. I have so many people who are just like, my work doesn't really look at police violence directly, but I think this is important. And I always have to talk to them like, yeah, it is important. And that's okay. We need that too, right? So I think it speaks a lot to like which types of work are hypervisualized and like what types of work people mobilize around more quickly, that makes people who are doing things that are connected feel like, oh, maybe since there's not this urgency around this, I shouldn't be doing it. And like, how do we get them to not look at it like that? Is
I was gonna say, not because I apologize. I was gonna say, me and you are of the same brain, because I literally, that's what I was about to say. Everybody role is not everything. Everybody can't do everything. Everybody is not supposed to be a political ed trainer. Everybody is not supposed to be working with kids. You know what I'm saying? Do some repro justice work. Maybe not like that. Like, it's not everything not for everybody. And so, like kind of lumping in, you know, like lumping all of what organizing into like this like really little small, like we could go on and on and on about like how you can't be an activist if. And also I will say that like the beauty of like friendships like ours is that there are times and spaces where we be like, okay, girl, so like on the ground, like in real life, like not like we say so many times, this is something I would never type out on the timeline because I would be dragged. But this is something that I need the space to face my reality about this situation, and I need safety and not feeling like I have to be a certain type of organizer, even in my personal relationships. I just need the safety right now to say that this thing in my life really sucks. It really hurts. I feel bitter. I feel angry. I feel jealous. My response does not feel like RJ. My response does not feel like TJ. I am acknowledging that right now, but I need that space. And I don't think that a lot of people know that those type of spaces can and do exist within doing the work. I think that we have set it up to where it feels like if you can't be a perfect, blameless, spotless organizer, then you shouldn't be. You should, you know, cancel culture, like even saying, yeah. Like, you can't be, like, I keep getting back to this point of like, you are enough, like as a you, to do some work. Does that mean that sometimes you might have to, some people's area of growth might be the reading? My area of growth, I don't know, is the reading. It might be like appropriateness, like, you know, like,
I think what helps that feeling is when you understand how interconnected with others you are, and when you understand like the history too, right? Like, this is not all up on me. These ideas are not even my own. I don't even have ownership over the work that I do because it has already been done before me. It is already being done unilaterally. Like, it is being done, and I am joining in on something that is collective. And I think once we start thinking like that, the pressure of like, I need to be this perfect individual organizer, everything is on me, is not as difficult because you understand the totality of the situation, which I think is really important. Damn, we only have 5 minutes left. So I'm gonna have us end here, and I'm just gonna I have all gratitude. I'm very, very thankful for the 3 of you for joining this panel and all the insight that you offered. And to everybody that is watching, the Reproductive Justice Guide will be out soon, hopefully. And so we hope to continue in doing the work that so many RJ practitioners are doing right now. So thank you, everybody. And I hope you have a wonderful night. Bye.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.
Thanks so much.